So they started the clock already, but before I start, I wanted to say, since I'm the last speaker, last storyteller here, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Saul and the BIF team for all the great work that they did to put this together. So thank you guys. Let's give them a I had no idea that this community event existed. I kept saying to people, I'm going to go speak at BIF, and people kept wondering who's BIF. So I'm happy to be able to spread the word of this great event. So hopefully we can do this again. Maybe I'll come back someday and talk about this. So I wanted to, being the last speaker is, I think, very hard in the sense that I got a lot of things to share based on the last 2 days of listening to folks and ideas. So I wanted to share a couple of ideas with you around what I believe to be important in education. And I wanted to start off with this idea that I believe that education disrupts poverty. I believe that education can transform lives, and I believe that education can change the destiny of a family in just one generation. Now, I know this to be true because it's a personal story for me. I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, to a single mom who came from Argentina, like many millions before her, to escape poverty, to escape injustice, to escape very unstable governments. And so she came to America. I was born in Hell's Kitchen, grew up with a single mother on welfare and food stamps, the old school food stamps, you know, the paper ones, the classic ones, the purple $20 bills, or I forget what the colors were. So that's how, so I grew up, and I showed up to this school, to PS 111, and they said, welcome to PS 111, and I said, ¿qué? So I had to learn English as my second language. Now, growing up in Hell's Kitchen was not the greatest experience in the world. I'm talking about the old Hell's Kitchen of the 70s and 80s, right? The one that you didn't go into. Not the one that you find today with all the nice restaurants and bars and expensive condos. The old Hell's Kitchen was not a nice place. I watched my friends that I grew up with become criminals, drug dealers, drop out of high school, never finish school, and so forth and so on. This was not a nice place to grow up, and I wanted out of this community. And there are many paths that look like they're plausible. And one of them, and the only one that really makes any sense, is the education path. So I decided to focus on my education and was able to graduate from high school through the grace of God and some hard work. I was able to go to college. And the reason why I went to college is because I remember looking at the statistics that said that at that time, you know, this was 100 years ago when I graduated high school, that there was about a 5% college admission or college graduation rate for Latinos. And I thought that was insane. And I, you know, being the stubborn person that I am, I wanted to see if I can do that. I wanted to beat those odds. And so I went to college, graduated from college, graduated from graduate school under the same premise, which was, what? Latinos don't have graduate degrees? I can do that too. So that's what I did. And here I am standing in front of you, talking to you, and doing amazing things that I am very proud of, including just a couple weeks ago where I got the chance where the First Lady invited me to speak at the Beat the Odds Summit for her Reach Higher initiative. And I got to speak in the East Room of the White House. Talk about a surreal experience, right? So here's a ghetto kid, a hoodlum, growing up in Hell's Kitchen, New York, and I'm standing at the podium in the East Room of the White House. And it took everything in my power not to scream out Baba Booey on that microphone. The surrealness of being in a place like that, we were standing there, and all of a sudden I walk up to the podium and I'm looking out and I'm like, oh, there's the red carpet, you know, where the president walks down and says, hey, we killed bin Laden, and then he walks back and disappears into the blue room or the red room. And I'm standing there going, I'm inside of a television set. Like this, I felt like I was inside a television set. But that's the ethos of this country. That's what's great about this country. And we've heard folks talk about the power of the United States of America, is that the ethos that if if you work hard, you get your education, you can accomplish anything. So a ghetto kid can show up and talk in the East Wing of the White House. That's the power that education has. But one of the things that we have to always keep in mind is that it goes beyond just the students that we have in our classroom. See, now I have kids, and my daughter hates this picture because she assumes that everyone assumes that that's her kid, and it's not, that's mine. So I have three. I have a 22-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 1-year-old. I can only handle one kid at a time. That's what that tells me. And my 22-year-old we never talked about college. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college. She assumes that she's going to graduate school because I went to graduate school. She assumes that she's capable of doing anything because she saw me do anything. And my 14-year-old is in the same boat. Their point of view, their perspective, what they have to look forward to is so fundamentally different than it was for me. That's the real power that education has, that we can actually change a family's destiny in just one generation with just one college degree or just one form of education. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is what I call low expectation syndrome, and how kids like me growing up that way are living with low expectations as part of their life. And we need to overcome that. And what I mean by that is, I'll tell you the story that I remember the most is I remember being in college and talking to one of my college professors, advisors in political science, and telling him that I wanted to continue studying public policy, that I wanted to keep going beyond my college degree. And he suggested that I apply to the Kennedy School at Harvard. And I said, kids like me don't go to Harvard. I'll get killed in Harvard. I can't go to Harvard. I'm not going to do that. So, I laughed it off and pretended that it was a joke. Looking back on it, now I realize that I would have gone to college to Harvard and I would have kicked their ass at Harvard, but I didn't know that at the time, because what I didn't know is that I was suffering through this concept that I call low expectation syndrome. This idea that we don't have the capability, the capacity to do the things that we see other people do. And I realized that lots and lots of low-income minorities are dealing with this issue, right? And we see it all around. We see failure all around us as we're growing up. We can see the low expectation that administrators or teachers have on us, and what they think we're going to turn out to be. I remember taking one of those "what are you going to be when you grow up" assessments when I was a kid, and it came back, the assessment said I was going to be an IRS agent. Now, I didn't know what an IRS agent was, and more importantly, I remember the teacher saying to me, "Oh, don't worry about it. Look, if you work hard, and you stay out of jail, you could probably get a good city job." And so that's the type of expectations that we have for our students. And so I love places like the Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia or High Tech High in San Diego that you heard from Larry, have unbelievably high expectations for kids, especially minority kids, and the potential that they have. The incident that happened this week with Ahmad and him being arrested for creating a clock is part of that story, part of that low expectation story, part of having a set of expectations for our students that look different. And that's part of what we're dealing with him. If you had a chance not to listen to the story about what happened to him, but actually listen to him after some of the interviews that he's done, he'll tell you that him being arrested was just part of the narrative that he was used to. He was used to being called a terrorist. He was used to having these types of expectations about who he was. So what this example pointed out today, or this week, is that we have these low expectations for people of color, minorities of color that live in low-income school districts. That's something that we need to take care of. So that's something else that we need to make sure that we do. I tried to tackle this by talking to students. And when I talk to students, low-income students, students of color, what I talk to them about is trying to convince them that who they are and where they come from is competitive advantage. Who they are and where they come from, those experiences are going to give them a unique perspective when they make it out of the world that they live in. And I give them my example, which is I'm proud of who I am. And for a long time, I'll be free to admit that I wasn't proud. I would hide the fact that I grew up poor, or I just let people assume that because I grew up in Manhattan, that I was rich whenever I was traveling or whenever I was somewhere else. I just let them assume that. And what I realized is that that's not healthy, that who you are and where you come from is part of your identity, and you should never be ashamed of that. So I do things and talk to these kids and tell them stories like, for example, if you email me at ghettosuperstar@google.com, that email comes to me, right? Or the fact that, that I proudly put these things up on my wall of who I am, where I come from, because it's important for others to see it. So this was my first office that I had in my home, and this was the background. If you did a video call with me, this is what you would see, right? To tell people that I am different, to kind of highlight that you're different. That's absolutely critical. The third thing that I know about education is that I think we ask students the wrong question. I cringe anytime someone asks my 14-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't like that question. Because one, how is he going to tell you that he wants to be a biomedical engineer? Or how is he going to tell you that he's going to be someone that works with sustainable materials? He doesn't know these things at this point. And so I think what we do is we ask students the wrong question. So instead of asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to ask students, what problem do you want to solve? Right? What problem spins in your head? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to solve that problem? Where do you get those knowledge, skills, and abilities? This is a picture of our Google Science Fair winners from last year. My favorite one is the girl there in the middle, Anne, who wanted to solve the problem for some of her friends who lived in the Philippines who did not have electricity and so couldn't do homework or couldn't do work at night, couldn't read at night. And so she wanted to solve that problem. And so she invented a flashlight that's powered with the heat of the human hand. She's 15 years old at this time, right? The power and the potential and the capacity that kids have to solve problems is amazing, and we have to take advantage of that, especially given the fact that we live in a world where we haven't even defined some of the biggest problems that we're going to be facing in our lives. Absolutely critical that they do this. And to do that, we need to create strong digital leaders that understand privacy and security, that know how to search and vet and look for information, that we can talk to about who are the people that you should be following, who can you collaborate with, what books, videos, blogs, websites, and so forth should you be paying attention to. What classes can you take online, offline? What are the things that you can do to change and to build the skills, the knowledge, and abilities that you need to solve the problem that you're interested in? I was talking to an educator a couple weeks ago who told me, yeah, but kids don't know, how to define problems. I'm like, yes, that's exactly the point. And when they tell me that kids might not understand what problem solving is, I like to point out my 1-year-old who solves problems all day long, right? She's like, how can I get this Sharpie and the contents of this Sharpie onto that wall? Those are the characteristics of kids that we want to do. We want to make sure that they can solve problems, that they have the critical skills that they need to solve those problems. And then the last thing that I want to point out here is that what we need more than anything in education is a culture shift. A shift to thinking about education, thinking about what we're doing with our systems in education, to think about them in more terms of innovation and iteration than we currently do. I worked in consulting for 6-7 years at Accenture, and I remember working with clients who would say, just tell me what's working where and how to do it, and we'll try to figure out how to apply it and best practices, and you'd have those conversations. The difference in education is that when I have those conversations with education leaders, they usually say, just show me a school that's working, and I'll just copy that, and I'll just do that, and that doesn't work. We need a shift, a culture shift in how we think about this. So I'll give you a quick Google example of what that looks like. This is the original Google.com. This is Larry and Sergey putting some machines together at Stanford and saying, let's do distributed computing in a different way. Let's do search in a different way. And then this is what Google looks like today. Two things to point out. Number one, this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and then this is what it looked like on Thursday. This took 17 years of what we need in education: problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, innovation, iteration. All the things that we need in education are very similar to building what a future of a data center looks like. And the second thing that's very important is that this is not what a data center will look like in the future, right? There is no data center. Just like there is no classroom, we need to constantly iterate and change what we're doing in education to build the learning models that reflect the economy that we're facing. And I'm starting to see that around the world, and I'm very excited. And so I want to kind of conclude, being the last speaker here today, with this idea that we can do this. We can change iteration and innovation. And we're doing this in a school that we're building in Phoenix that I'd be happy to share more share more information on, called the Phoenix Coding Academy, where we're taking inquiry-based learning and we're putting it in a school where programming will be the language, and you can be iterative and innovative in a public school district. And we're doing it around passion and students' passion around computer science, and really excited about that. So this last idea here is that what we really want to focus on, and we think about innovation, and we think about business, and we think about what we can do in this space, is to make sure that we figure out what problem we want to solve. And by the way, this works for adults as well. What problem do you want to solve? And then how long can you stick on that problem so that we can get to the solutions that we really need to get to in education? Thank you very much for having me.